So thank you all for being here. My name is Karen Park. I'm a principal at Bernstein Global Wealth Management in San Francisco, and I'm going to be your host for this panel. I'm also the mother to 3 beautiful boys, and my middle son Milo has very complex disabilities, so I'm thrilled to be a part of this fantastic event, both as a speaker and a participant. We are going to cover a ton of ground with you on this panel in the time that we have together, including the public benefits that you might consider for your child, as well as how you can possibly supplement those benefit programs with your personal private assets by way of funding either an ABLE account or a third-party special needs trust. So I think and hope that there's going to be something useful for all of you in the room during our panel, and we will leave time at the end for Q&A. We are going to begin with comments from Jim Huyck, who is a consultant with over 40 years of experience in the government agencies that provide services to our children. He has been a senior counselor at the Department of Rehabilitation, associate dean of special education at the San Diego Community Colleges, and also the executive director of the Alta California Regional Center, so a huge depth of experience. Now, some of you may recall that Jim spoke at this conference last year. Jill wanted me to remind all of you that the presentation he gave last year went through a lot of the nuts and bolts and basics of different types of government programs that your child can access, and that video of that talk is available on the SFASA website, so you can refer to that for background. But Jill asked Jim this year to do something a little different and talk about, quote, more challenging topics than he did last year. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jim.
Great. Thank you, Karen. Just to add a little bit to my background, my wife's brother, my brother-in-law, was a consumer of the San Diego Regional Center, so we had the opportunity to sit on the other side of the table to at IPP meetings and get an idea of what that's like. I also like to tell families that I've come over from the dark side because I'm no longer a exec of a regional center, but rather advocating for you folks and for your family members. As Karen mentioned, I've done this presentation many times. Many of you have seen it probably multiple times, so I'm going to have just a little bit of review of some of the basics of how the regional center provides their services. But then there were some questions that were submitted to me ahead of time that were very specific, and so I wanted to just address some of those. So, to begin with, okay, regional centers, just the basics. Created under the Lanterman Act. I think everyone knows Frank Lanterman, assemblyman back in the Ronald Reagan years. He was chair of the budget committee under Ronald Reagan, and he literally held the budget captive until, as a result of parents such as you who had gone to him and followed him up in his elevator at the Senator Hotel and pounded on his desk and said there's got to be something better than services in developmental centers. State hospitals, they were called there. There needed to be a community-based array of services. That created the 2 original regional centers as pilots, one in San Francisco, which is now called Golden Gate Regional Center, and another regional center in Southern California that's now Lanterman Regional Center. Long story short, there's now 21 regional centers, as you're probably aware. They serve an array of disabilities, much broader than originally. Originally, it was the old terminology. They only serve folks with mental retardation. Now, as you know, there's 5 different categories. The regional centers, as I say, have expanded to 21. They are private nonprofit corporations. I think many times people think they're state agencies. When the regional centers were created, they said it was too important a job to leave to state employees. Hopefully no one here is a state employee, but it was that it needed to be provided by folks outside the state system. So it's done through contracts with the 21 regional centers. They contract with the Department of Developmental Services. That is a state agency. Over $3 billion goes out to the regional center systems. A system that could never be created now and is not matched by any other state. I have clients that have moved from this area to Georgia, for instance, and it's impossible to get folks on services unless they're on a waiver program, and you can wait years and years and years to get on a waiver program. So anyway, let's move on. Regional centers' responsibilities. As you probably know, regional centers don't provide the services directly. They are provided through a whole array, hundreds and hundreds of vendors that the regional centers have. The other important thing to remember with regional centers, like most agencies, is they are saying that they are payer of last resort, that all other sources of funding must be pursued, and many times now even appealed if there's a denial. And so depending upon the regional center, depending upon the situation, you have to not only pursue the funding from other sources, but you might have to appeal it before the regional center will get their checkbook out and pay for something, because they are payer of last resort. The regional center services, of course, are provided through the IPP process, similar to the IEP. The services, my brother-in-law, when he was a consumer of the regional centers, my wife and the sisters came to me and said, well, what are all the services that Chuck can get? You know, where is the list of services he's entitled to? And of course, I had to say to them, as I say to you, the entitlement really is what's in the IPP. And the IPP consists of what is the identified needs and what are the assessed identified needs, and also how those services can be created or paid for that will meet those needs. That's the entitlement, what is in the IPP. So that is a very important document. The philosophy, of course, is to provide services that allow a consumer's life to approximate that of his or her same-age non-disabled peers. And services can be different from regional center to regional center. You can imagine Kern Regional Center in Mono counties compared to downtown Los Angeles or San Francisco. The services are going to look very different. Okay, required components of an IPP. I think this is all review for most of you, is the assessment, goals, objectives, and the services and supports to achieve those goals. Regional centers, again, payers of last resort from these various sources. We just talked about that. Now, getting into more specifics. This was one of the questions that was asked. The regional center, the Lanterman Act talks about the regional center not only tapping into what's called generic resources, but tapping into what's called natural supports. And so sometimes a regional center will say, well, listen, you've got some grandparents, you've got some siblings. They can provide the family with what consists of respite. And so sometimes we have had a situation where we had to take a regional center to a fair hearing, and that they had said that there's a grandparent that's living in that family home, and that grandparent has been providing what consists of respite for that family. Therefore, we, the regional center, we're not going to pay for that. Well, we took that up all the way to an administrative law judge. The grandparent said, hey, I can't do this any longer. I've got a mortgage to meet myself. I need to be paid as the respite provider. Regional center said, nope, you're a grandparent. You're living in the home. We consider you a natural support. Well, the judge didn't agree. And we prevailed on that. And we've had other regional centers take that position. And when they do, I get out that ALJ decision, I send it off to them, and we usually can push back on that. The regional center's argument was, well, that's the way we've always done it. And that, the judge said, that's not a basis for denying the service. So anyway, long story short, we did get the regional center to agree, by order of the judge, that the grandparent could be paid. So I still have cases where I'll start working with a family and they'll say, well, we don't have respite. And I'll say, why not? Well, we don't have anybody who can provide it. I say, well, is there a sibling in the family? Are they over 18? Yeah, and they say, but they live in the house. They won't allow them. So I say, yes, they can. And so we push back on that. Okay. Another area that was asked about was the special needs trust. We've had regional centers take the position that if the person has a special needs trust, we actually had a regional center who was providing a whole array of services. And when they found out there was a special needs trust, they said, whoa, wait a minute. We're not going to pay for anything because this trust is in place and it specifically names all the kinds of supports and services that the trust can pay for. And so they said, we're not going to pay for anything. Well, we took that one all the way up to an ALJ. And the ALJ, the administrative law judge, did a really great job of writing the support for his decision that spoke about the fact that the regulations speak about regional centers tapping into generic resources, but when they're talking about that, that means other governmental agencies. It does not mean special needs trust. Had the legislature intended the special needs trust would be considered as a generic resource, that would have specifically been included in the regulation. But I still have cases come to me. Family says, hey, they're not going to pay for this, they're not going to pay for that. And so again, I shoot off a copy of that ALJ decision, and we've been successful in pushing back on the regional centers. ALJ decisions are not precedent setting. If I was an executive of a regional center, I might say, hey, we're gonna deny it again. We may get a different judge. We may get a different judge with another decision, but we've not had that happen. The judge that wrote this decision did a really great job of justifying the decision he made. He quoted some of the Attorney General decisions that have been made on this topic. So I think we have a very well documented decision that we've not had any other regional center want to test that with another judge. Any questions as we go along? Feel free to raise your hand. There was a question about the ratios in programs and consumers with severe behaviors. There is the possibility that both in a residential setting and in day programs, the regional center can pay for what's called supplemental staffing. That's one-to-one staffing. Regional centers are limited in being able to do that. It has to be time limited. There has to be regular reviews, but that can be a way of enriching or increasing the staffing ratio, particularly with those with behavioral issues. So we've had situations where we've had a residential program or we've had a day program that have said, you know, we really can't handle this person, even if it was a behavioral day program that has a pretty rich staffing ratio. I've said to the regional center, well, let's offer them, hey, how about we offer them a one-to-one for a limited amount of time, and we'll write it very tightly. It's going to be for these specific behaviors for this specific period of time. And we can usually sweeten it to the point that the day program will then be agreeable to take the consumer. It can't be ongoing forever, though. It is time limited. There's a whole new service, it's somewhat new, called Tailored Day, that should say Tailored Day Services, which is really an alternative to traditional day program services. It was actually created in 2011. It was a way to get greater customization of the services while, of course, saving the state money. And I'm going to refer you folks to attend the session that I attended this morning that was given by a couple of folks from San Andreas Regional Center and Golden Gate Regional Center. That was Jeff Darling and Amanda Pyle, who did an excellent job of talking about how tailored day services and also how there's paid internship programs. There's a number of different programs that are available now that are being introduced within the regional center system that you might want to attend their breakout session, which is at 2:45 this afternoon. I'd strongly advise that you go to that because they did a really excellent job of talking about some of these new programs. But just getting back to the tailored day services, this really is in lieu of an adult day program. And it can cost only 80% of what a day program would cost. So a day program is usually 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, that's 30 hours. So that cost, if you take 80% of that, then there can be a tailored day service that can involve employment, volunteering, post-secondary education. You could have a consumer who has decided they're going to take some classes at the community college, but they need someone to be with them, to help them do the registration, to pick out the courses they want, that type of thing. So a vendor who is vendored for tailored day service could provide that to them. But given the amount that they're paid and you do the math, it turns out to be only about 8 to 10 hours a week that they would be receiving this service. So it's not for a consumer that's going to need a 30 hour per month program, 30 hour per week program. Okay, self-determination. Everybody's been talking about self-determination forever. It's been in the mill for many years. It's not here yet. The waiver that would allow it to occur, they're still going back and forth between California and the federal government on the enacting of that. But some of the regional centers are in fact doing the orientation sessions, and so that's something that you have to go through in order to get onto the waiting list at your particular regional center. So you'd want to contact your regional center, go through the orientation, and then your name is submitted to the Department of Developmental Services, and there's going to be 2,500 families that once self-determination is actually launched, that 2,500 families will be selected to participate. And I think, as most of you know, with self-determination, that gives you control over the budget. It's based upon the budget that you are, the amount of money that's currently being spent on your consumer. That money can then be used in very creative ways, not having to be done through existing vendors, and that money can be used to provide a more customized program for your consumer. It's called self-determination. Supported living. I think most of you are familiar with the supported living services. The question that was asked here is, can there be other types of services rolled into a supported living services plan? And the answer is yes. Supported living services is that service that allows an individual to live independently with the assistance from an agency of staff that comes into the home. My brother-in-law, Chuck, had this. The SLS workers would come in the morning, make sure he got up, got dressed, got his lunch, got out the door to his job. And then in the evening, they'd come and be sure that he got dinner, got his clothes laid out for the next day, and was ready to go. That's supported living. But you can also roll day program into that, and you can roll employment program into that. You can roll other types of things into the SLS program. So what that would mean is that the SLS staff that is working with the individual to allow them to live independently in their home can also be the staff that would take them out into the community for volunteer work, for socialization. They can transport them. So that can all be rolled into the SLS plan. Okay. This was another one. Where is it possible for SLS to be done in a parent's home? A regulatory restriction, no, it can't be. So you cannot have SLS in the parent's home. Now, the other service that's similar to SLS called Independent Living Skills Training, that's where a consumer it's determined that consumer can learn the skills that they need to live independently. That's why it's called Independent Living Skills Training. That can be provided in the parent's home, and it's usually provided about 6 months prior to the consumer moving out on their own. Although I've seen recently some regional centers are actually providing ILS in the parent's home even without the plan for that consumer to move out into the community. What they're saying is they just want the person to be more independent even in the parent's home. That's a bit of a stretch. I think it's great that they're doing that, but it surprised me that they were doing ILS even for consumers that were not planning to move out on their own. What this is, though, is supported living. And under regulation, the supported living cannot take place in the parent's home. However, we sometimes have situations where on the same property, we have a living unit of some sort that has separate kitchen, separate bathroom. That can be considered a separate living unit, and SLS can occur in that. So it gets down to, exactly how are the living units structured on that property, and whether or not it's a separate living unit. It can't just be, at the end of the hall there's a bedroom and we're going to call that a separate unit. It's got to be its own functional unit with separate bathrooms and kitchens and that type of thing. And then it could be on the same property as the parents. Well, I think that you could probably have a separate address for another unit. You sometimes have a half, so such and such number and a half. Again, I would like to see the regulation that actually says that, because many times regional centers will come up with their own policies, operational policies, which are to be approved by DDS, by the way, but they still might not be within regulation, and if taken to a judge, the judge may say there's no regulation that says that. I don't know of any regulation that says anything about having a separate address. I've never seen that. Yes? Yeah, talk to your legislator. That's not up to the regional center. That is a regulation that actually states that SLS cannot be in the parent's home, where ILS, there's no restriction.
Allow me to interrupt for 1 second. If you're going to make a comment or have a question, please use the microphone so the people, yes, it's God speaking.
Yes, I was going to say.
So that the people who are watching online can hear as well, or repeat the question. Thank you.
Okay. So anyway, that question was why can ILS be in the parent's home and SLS can't? That's not a regional center making that decision. That's actually in regulation. Other questions? I think we're getting near the end of my slides. Oh, there is what's called a health and safety waiver. This is something that can be used, okay, to sometimes increase the rate that a vendor is receiving if there can be the argument that it's due to a health and safety concern that consumer's needs are not going to be met unless there is a health and safety waiver, which allows there to be an increase in the service that's going to be provided. It's a pretty laborious process to go through. It does require the executive director's approval, and it does require DDS to approve it. So it's one of those things that it's got a lot of bureaucratic steps to go through. I've seen some health and safety waivers, and it is in regulation. It would take a good argument, as is detailed here, a detailed description of the enhancement of the services needed to mitigate the risk, an analysis of the cost effectiveness, information as to the availability. You'd have to look at all other possible ways to meet that consumer's needs. Detailed verification that the alternate service, even a one-to-one, would not meet the consumer's need, and then of course the approvals both at the executive director level and at DDS. So, okay, institutional deeming. I think we've hit on this before, but institutional, and this was a question that people asked me to please cover again. Institutional deeming on the Medi-Cal is a really cool thing. We have clients that are under 18, and because of the parents' income and resources, they're not eligible for SSI. If they're not eligible for SSI, that means they're not eligible for SSI-linked Medi-Cal. And Medi-Cal is really important. Medi-Cal is going to allow all of the fees that regional centers are now charging you, or at least 2 of the 3, to be waived, because the federal government does not allow the regional centers to charge a fee because the federal government is providing Medicaid money. And so there can be no fee unless the child is on Medi-Cal. I mean, they cannot charge a fee if the child is on Medi-Cal. So we want to get the child on Medi-Cal. It also allows for IHSS. So the way it works is that the regional center consumer must be receiving at least one service paid for by the regional center. This is usually respite. I've seen even MedAlert bracelets that the regional center pays for to qualify as the one service. The regional center then places the child onto what's called the DDS Medicaid waiver. That stands for Department of Developmental Services. Then the regional center asks the local Medi-Cal agency to institutionally deem the child on the Medi-Cal. That's a process by which only the child's income and resources are looked at, not the parents. Okay? Now, sometimes we get into a situation where the child is getting child support. Child support is income to the child, so we can't set that aside, but the income and the resources of the parent are then not deemed to the child. So it allows, as I say, for in-home support services, and allows for any of the fees that regional centers charge to be waived. Respite. For those of you who haven't heard, as of January, new regulation, there cannot be a cap on the amount of respite, either in-home or out-of-home. New regulation. Up until now, or until December 31st, unless there's an extraordinary situation, 90 hours per quarter, that's 30 hours a month, of in-home respite is the maximum, and 21 days of out-of-home respite is the maximum. Effective January 2018, those limits are no longer applying. It should all be based upon assessed need through the IPP process. So many times, I'll have families come to me and I'll ask them how much respite they're getting, and they'll say, well, 12 hours. And I'll say, why only 12? And they'll say, well, the service coordinator told us that was the maximum. I go, no. The maximum is 90 per quarter. But service coordinators for whatever reason, are telling families that, and it's not accurate. And even now, there can be exceptions made to the 90 hours a quarter for instance, if the respite is necessary in order for the family to be able to maintain the child in their home and not have to place them. That would be a reason right now to exceed the 90 hours per quarter. But as of January, there are no caps. It should all be based upon the needs of the child and the family. Just, again, that everything's based upon assessed need. I think I can skip over that, and that's my presentation. Thank you very much.
Excuse me, Jim, may I ask a question, please?
Sure.
Right here.
Yes.
Thank you. Terrific. We're glad to hear you talk. About out-of-home respite,
Yes.
no longer 21 days. What's your take on that? Will the regional centers use that to crank it down? In other words, how many do you think clients will get more than 21 days, and how many will end up with less than 21 days, which until now was the default?
Well, this shouldn't be a ticket to lower it, because it's been up to 21 days. The problem, though, always is the reality of that respite takes place in a community care licensed board and care home. The problem always has been and will continue to be finding the bed, because to find the respite bed is the problem. So I think that's almost going to be a natural. For those of you who know, community care licensed homes, 4 beds, 6 beds, they're in the business of keeping those beds full because they get paid when the bed is full. When they have an empty bed, they're willing to take consumers in on a short-term basis for respite. But when that bed, if they have the opportunity to fill that bed with a full-time consumer or with a bunch of part-time respite people, they're going to take the full-time. So the really quality homes fill up, stay filled up. And so I think the natural limit on that 21 days is just going to be finding the beds.
Could you
Yes.
put up that next to the last slide that went through pretty fast, please? Thank you.
Next to the last? Oh, sorry. Yeah. Did you have a question about? Oh, you're just taking a picture of it. Okay. Okay, yes.
Hi. I have been unable to get services through my regional center and to get respite. And I wasn't able to get respite, I was told, because of my income.
Okay, I a moment ago had referred to some of the fees that are now being charged to families. One of those fees is the parental fee for both daycare and for respite. It used to be for social rec, but social rec is gone. But depending upon what your income is, the parents are required to pay a certain percentage of the respite that's determined, that's needed through the IPP process. So let's say it's determined, let's just say 100 hours a month, and given your income, there's a chart they go by, you're supposed to pay 60% of that. The regional center will only pay 40. At a certain point of income, regional center is not going to pay any. So you may well, is that the reason that they gave you, that they're not going to pay for it, was your income?
That was part of it, and
Yeah.
then finally I learned here last year that I should try to go to a camp, have my son go to a camp, even for a day camp, and that would be one service that I would be getting from them because I didn't qualify for any other service.
Okay, remember what I said about the institutional deeming. Get your child institutionally deemed on the Medi-Cal, and that particular participation in the fee, they cannot charge you. So get your child on Medi-Cal, and they won't be able to reduce the amount that they pay for because of your income.
Okay.
So, yeah.
A lot of the speakers this morning spoke about 2-bedroom units. I was just wondering if there was a restriction on an SLS provider being the resident of the second bedroom in a setup like that.
You mean the staff person?
So if the family's purchasing or renting a 2-bedroom unit,
Right.
can the inhabitant of the other unit be also the SLS provider?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you can have you can have one consumer living alone with staff coming in. You can have 2 consumers living with staff coming in. You could have 1 consumer and staff, an overnight sleep person living in there. So there can be a whole combination. Some regional centers are almost. I'm sorry, we're running out of time.
We're going to take 3 more questions.
Okay.
Maybe take these 3 and then we'll move on.
Okay. Go ahead.
I have a quick question. You said that the Medi-Cal waiver can be given to children under 18, and I know that. What if they're over 18?
Well, if they're over 18, we don't need to do that because their eligibility for SSI is based upon their income and resources already. So they most likely have limited income and resources. They'd qualify for SSI. Therefore, they'd get SSI-linked Medi-Cal.
And if the SSI was dropped for other reasons, can they?
Such as?
Such as SSA for a retiring father
Yeah.
then can they still stay on their Medi-Cal?
We can get, there's many ways to apply for Medi-Cal, as you know, and so Medi-Cal could be gotten through the county Medi-Cal agency. Given their income, they may have a share of cost with Medi-Cal, but they would at least be eligible for Medi-Cal. Now, understand with share of cost, that can lower the amount of IHSS that's paid for, because you have to meet your share of cost each month, but at least they would be on Medi-Cal. But given if their Social Security disability off the parent is too high, they will have a share of cost with their Medi-Cal.
Okay, I guess that hasn't hit us yet.
Okay.
SARC just institutionally deemed my 21-year-old again, so I don't know.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, you over here.
And I have a question on the next slide.
The next one is
Oh,
Q&A.
the one before that.
That's okay.
Yeah,
Respite, yes.
the last line there.
Oh, yes.
I'm confused because I'm just trying to apply IHHS for my daughter.
Yes.
I didn't know about it, and she has respite. Cannot be considered respite if the parent is the...
Yeah. What I'm saying, again, regional centers always want to tap into other resources. So let's say through the IPP process, it's determined that there's X amount of hours of respite needed. What the regional center will say is, well, family, go for IHSS, have someone be your IHSS worker, and while that IHSS is taking place, you guys can leave the house. That counts as respite. So what I say to families is, no, you can be the IHSS worker, and if you're the IHSS worker, that's not respite. So the regional center cannot count that towards the amount of respite that you need.
Okay, so we can get both, basically.
You can get both, that's right.
Thank
And they can't deduct for the amount of IHSS you're getting if you're the IHSS worker, because it's not respite for you. Last
This
question.
is actually a follow-up. As we retire, we aging parents
Yes.
retire, there seems to be an issue with medical insurance. I've been told by one consultant, my daughter who was institutionally deemed under Medi-Cal should go onto Medicare as we lose our private insurance. Can you shed any light on that particular picture as to the best thing to do?
Well,
Should-
they'd only be eligible for Medicare if they're going to be getting Social Security disability insurance
She-
off one of her parents.
So she gets SSI and she's in a group home.
Okay.
So is there any way to navigate with clarity this whole medical insurance picture upon retirement is the bigger
Who's
issue.
retiring? You mean one of the parents is retiring?
Yeah, one of us is retiring.
that's
so
why
we
I
no
was-
longer have access to employer-provided medical
Right.
insurance.
So one of the parents is retiring.
Correct.
The child can then apply for Social Security disability insurance, childhood disability benefits, SSD.
So is that in addition to SSI?
Depending upon how much they pull off of one of the parents' accounts, they could have both an SSI check and an SSDI check. So if they're getting about $1,000
Yep.
off the parent's account, they're going to lose their SSI. Now, technically, under the Pickle Amendment, they can remain on Medi-Cal through the county, because Congressman Pickle said that if somebody loses their SSI-linked Medi-Cal because of an increase in Social Security disability or Social Security, they can remain on Medi-Cal. But what I was going to say is, it gets complicated. But
Yes.
once they're on that SSDI for 24 months, then they will get Medicare.
So we have to apply for that through us for the Social Security
Yeah,
office.
they will, right.
That
Well,
is very
first of all, you have
complex.
to
Thank
apply
you.
for the SSDI, Childhood Disability Benefits,
Got it.
and then after 24 months, go in and get Medicare.
Very helpful.
Yeah, okay.
Great, thanks.
Okay.
So we're gonna move forward because we still have a lot of other material to cover with you. We'll hopefully still have more time at the end if you have additional questions for Jim. So Jim talked about the matrix of government services available to your child and how those can help support your child over the years. But your family may also be in the fortunate position of setting aside some personal private assets to help support your child. And to this end, we are going to turn first to the topic of ABLE accounts, which have received a lot of press over the last few years. So by show of hands, how many of you have heard of the ABLE Act? Pretty much everyone, so that's good, but there's a lot of devils in the details, as you're going to hear. So next we're going to have Steve Dale and Carrie Fisher-Stone educate you on how ABLE accounts might fit into your planning. Please note that they are separately going to host a more extensive 90-minute breakout on this topic at 4 o'clock if you want to do a deeper dive. By way of introduction, Carrie is the Deputy Executive Director for the California ABLE Act Board, very knowledgeable on this topic. She has over 10 years of experience in management and program administration in both the public and nonprofit sectors, and is also the mother to a 12-year-old son with autism, yes. Now, Steve is a seasoned attorney who has decades of experience as a disability rights advocate and a special needs planner, estate planner. He is on the advisory committee of CalABLE. He told me that he has over 10 hours of material on the ABLE Act that with Carrie's help, he's now going to condense into 20 minutes for all of you.
All right, well, I will go first. Although it's good to see that so many people are familiar with ABLE already, Steve is really going to go into more of the guts about the ABLE Act, ABLE accounts, how they work, eligibility, how you can use the ABLE account. In particular, I'm really kind of here to give an update on where the California program is, because that seems to be the question on everybody's mind lately. A lot of you probably know that there are actually, I think it's 28 other states already operating ABLE programs right now. We were a little slower out of the gate. There's a couple of reasons for that. We're California, we like to make things more complicated. We had to take some time to write some state regulations. And these accounts also require you to contract with a financial services firm. And so we had to go through a procurement process, a state procurement process to do that, and went out to bid a couple of times to try to procure a firm. Took a couple of times because the market of folks doing this right now is relatively small, and the firms who did respond to our bids they didn't want to agree to our standard of care. So the good thing about California is that we do have a really strong standard of care. And, it requires that these firms really, have the participants' best interests in mind, act as a fiduciary to the participants. And so in the end, even though it's taken us a little longer, we do believe that we'll have a more secure and robust program. And we've also had the chance to do a lot of lessons learned from states that have already started. So the big question is when, and we just acquired a firm, Nottingham. That's the good news. They are a financial services firm out of North Carolina. We really liked them. They're new to the ABLE space, but they have over 20 years of experience in mutual funds. And the thing that we really liked about them is that they have shown a dedication to be flexible during this process. We talk often about the fact that this program is one that will evolve over time. The laws have been changing a lot, and it's already evolved quite a bit. But the other thing that was important to us was to develop a program here that really had our population's best interests at heart. And so they've shown a willingness to be adaptable and flexible as we go through this process. So they are actually coming to our next board meeting, which is next Tuesday, the 5th. They're coming to Sacramento to do an introduction to our board, and they're going to go outline the whole gamut of what the program can entail. So everything from the cost, fees, investment options. They're going to talk a little bit about their marketing strategy and how they plan to approach this. So if anybody's interested in that, in a few slides, I do have a link to our website where you can actually see how you could call into that meeting if you're interested in really hearing. They're really going to go into details about what the program will look like. In terms of a launch date, tentatively we're hoping March 1st. So we're getting a lot closer once and for all. And we also spent the last year really trying to engage the population, folks like yourselves, to really, again, hear, how can we develop a program that's going to best meet your needs. And to that end, we really appreciate a lot of feedback as we go through the process. We're always open to your comments and suggestions, so we're always available. Just wanted to make sure that that was emphasized. Oops, wrong thing. Okay. Features and benefits. So a lot of these plans tend to look, if you've looked into them, they have a lot of similar features. For instance, you can have a debit card that's linked to your account. And we'll also have some other fun features, the ability to invite through like an e-gifting platform. You can invite, because anybody can contribute to an ABLE account, you can actually invite friends, family members, really anybody to contribute to an account. So that's kind of a cool feature. Our fees will be competitive. There are account fees that go with these programs. They are to pay for the cost of running the program. Depending on which investment options you select, there's also what we call a basis fee charge, depending on the investment strategy that you pick. So, but overall, these are low cost programs. Ours is tending to look like it's going to be right in the middle of the range. The annual account management fees tend to go anywhere from $0 if you were a state that was lucky enough to be given an appropriation, and our structure was a little bit different. We got a loan from the legislature that we ultimately have to pay back, so we do have to collect that fee, but anywhere from $0 to $60 a year, and so we're going to fall at $36 a year. And then on top of that is that investment fee, depending on which investment option you're selecting. And you know, people will select their investment strategy depending on how they're going to use the account. So if you're going to do more long-term savings, you might pick a more aggressive option. You know, there will be a conservative, moderate, aggressive option available. You might want an FDIC option, so that's something more like a money market where your money is protected. You might, you know, be using the money more for day-to-day living expenses. And so in that case, that sort of an option might make more sense to you. You won't earn a lot of interest over time, but your money will be there. It will be safe. It will be secure. And so just to wrap up, so Steve can kind of get more into the guts of this, one of the things we're really excited about, the other thing we took the time to do was to pass some legislation that's pretty important. The federal law allows states to file a claim. There's a Medicaid clawback on these ABLE accounts as outlined in the federal statute. And so this has obviously not been popular with a lot of folks who are considering opening an account. It essentially says that the states can file a claim against an account after a beneficiary passes. And so we were able to pass legislation that will eliminate that clawback here in California. And that's a big deal. So if Medi-Cal is a concern, thank you. Thank our advocates and our parent advocates who they came to the Capitol and they testified and they wrote a lot of letters. A lot of people really helped spearhead that. We're one of just 3 states that has that type of legislation. So if Medi-Cal is important to you, you'll definitely want to take advantage of CalABLE, California's program. It will only apply to, the protection only applies to a Californian with a CalABLE account. And the other thing we did was make ourselves a national plan. That's pretty much in line with what the other plans are doing. I think almost all of them are national plans. There's a few who are not, that only allow their own residents to participate. That's good for us. It just increases the pool. It'll drive down fees over time. And then we also had an assembly person, Calderon, who passed some legislation that would prevent an ABLE account from being paid back to pay a money judgment. So that was interesting. And then we're going to keep working on some legislative initiatives, and this is where, having you all here, I'd like to say, you know, we, again, really count on the advocacy of this population to help us in getting these things through. One of the proposals we just submitted was to remove, so in our state statute, we have a $1,000 cap on accounts currently for any state means tested program. So in the federal law, there's a $100,000 cap in the accounts on SSI, and that's across the board. That's federal law, so everybody's operating with that $100,000 cap. Unfortunately, we think that the state authors misinterpreted that intention, and they also applied that $100,000 cap to state means tested programs, so CalWorks, other types of state means tested programs. So we actually just submitted a proposal to, it's literally technical cleanup language that would just strike that cap amount from state means tested programs. And if anybody's interested in helping me pursue that, you can email me and I can actually send you the names of some folks to contact, and I can also share some talking points around that as well. And then we hope to, at some point, be able to provide some sort of tax incentive 2 contributors. This is something that a lot of the other plans have. We did try to push an initiative last legislative session, but it just didn't pan out. We didn't get a lot of buy-in for that, but we will keep trying to do that. And then the other thing that we want to continue to work on, our statute gives us the ability to accept private funds, but we need to also take the step of specifying how we might use those monies. And one of the things we've wanted to do was try to find a way to help low-income folks participate in this program. You know, a lot of people are on benefits. They're like, this is a great program, but I just don't have any extra money to put away into an ABLE account. And we hear that loud and clear. We've had some creative thinking around maybe starting up a foundation that could help raise funds, matching grant program where we could actually help offset the cost of fees to some of our lower income participants. So that's another proposal that we'll be pursuing as well. And here's our website. I'd like to encourage folks, if you're interested in staying, up to date on what's going on with us, you can go here. We have the left sidebar, you can't see it all the way down, but there is an option there to subscribe to our listserv, so you can sign up for emails there and kind of find out what's going on with the program. If you're interested in listening to our board meeting, we also have our meeting agenda and materials posted in that same area, and so it has a call-in number where you can call in and listen to our board meetings. We're very transparent. We love the public's feedback and participation, so definitely feel free to follow us, reach out, etc.
I have a quick question. So
Sure.
are there some states that I could do an ABLE account and get tax incentives?
I don't know that as a Californian,
Not as a Californian?
I don't think so. Yeah, and I'll pass it to Steve.
No, in fact, as we kind of go through this, and I'm going to be squeezing a lot in here in a short amount of time, ABLE accounts have been available for over a year. So, for instance, I have an ABLE account for my niece, which I will move to CalABLE sometime after March here. So anyway, so when are they available? They've been available for some time. Let me run through this, and this is we're going to run through this as fast as we can. By the way, I have over 10 hours of material on this, of which I will be adding more. So if you want to email steve@dalelawfirm.com, I will send you the link. And then maybe you can make some sense of what we're talking about. For this group, it should be pretty straightforward. Who is qualified to open up an ABLE account? Well, there's a 2-tiered test. The first one is, and for this group, this shouldn't be difficult. You have to show you're disabled before the age of 26. Well, since IDD has to be before the age of 18, the math's pretty easy on that. The other thing is it's means tested, so there's 2 ways of showing this. One is if you're getting any kind of disability-related benefits, SSI, SSDI, childhood disability benefits, that kind of thing, you're in, done, we could just move on. Or if not, then you can do it through a doctor's certification, okay? Now, this is, as we were talking about in the breakout session, this is not like working with Social Security, which I would say is not very disability-friendly, not at all. This is run by the Department of Treasury, which is crazy disability friendly. They will bend over backwards, and it seems like there's almost no rules when it comes to this kind of thing. So once again, most of the programs don't even want the certification. They want you to certify that you got it. I mean, this is not Social Security. Okay, other key features. Contributions can be made by any person. Well, that doesn't mean what you might think. Contributions can be from a trust. It can be from an annuity. It doesn't matter if it's cash and it's fungible, they'll take it, okay? Contributions are not tax deductible, at least federally. And once again, to answer the other question, any of the states that do have tax deductions are state tax deductions, okay? But, every cent counts. Income earned by the accounts would not be taxed. This is basically a 529 plan. In fact, it's a 529A. Okay, so it grows tax-free. There are conceivably some penalties. You would have to work so hard, first off, to trigger the penalty, and secondly, it'd almost be impossible to get caught. Anyway, here, account withdrawals for qualified expenses are not taxable. Okay, individuals are limited to one account and one account only. So for instance, I have a niece named Erica in Bayshore, New York. I almost got to be the first Californian to open up an ABLE account, and then unfortunately I didn't read my own materials that says an uncle can't open up an account, as we're going to see here. So I'm one of the first Californians to have an ABLE account for my niece here. Total annual contributions are whatever the gift tax limit is. So it's right now it's $14,000. So for you folks who want to really jump on the bandwagon, you could open up an account today, put in your $14,000. Here, and then next year you could put in $15,000, and when CalABLE is up and open, because why would we want to use another state here, then we can get up and running here, and you would have $29,000 in it. Okay, aggregate contributions are subject to an overall limit by the state for 529 accounts. This is one of the things that the CalABLE board is working on to increase it beyond 100,000, which they will. So in California, the upper limit you could put in is 475,000. Now let's see, if we take 475 and divide it by 14, it would take 31.6 years to get there here. So I don't think I'll ever see a maxed out ABLE account unless these rules change during my lifetime, but you never know. This is one of these things, and once again, I realize I'm running through this very quickly. There's two tiers, and this gets confusing sometimes. The first tier is as long as the ABLE account is below $100,000, the SSI continues. If it goes over $100,000, then the SSI goes into suspension, but it's the Medi-Cal still continues. Now, here's the thing, and if we had more time, I'd love to go through it. For most of you, by the time the account got to 100,000, your kids are not going to be on SSI anyway. They're going to be on childhood disability benefits, and 2 years after that, they'll be getting Medicare and Medi-Cal. So you really have to look at the situation here. What can you use it for? And I'm going to shortcut this. We're having a hard time trying to figure out what you can't use it for, okay? And these rules are, the only thing we can come up with is we don't think you can use it for gambling, and you shouldn't, unless you win here. So you can use it for almost anything, okay? And just about, oh, that's right, I'm on camera, right? Oh. If you were to use it for something that you're not supposed to, and I would never tell you don't follow the rules, here, but you would, first off, you'd have to turn yourself in probably through an audit by the IRS. How many of you think your children are going to get audited by the IRS? I mean, it's just, you should follow the rules, but it would be hard to screw this up. I'm going to shortcut this on the payback. The only thing about the payback that you'd want to look at is that what 218 does is it eliminates the payback for a California residents using CalABLE. So if you had a CalABLE account and you moved to Pittsburgh, here, during the time you are in Pennsylvania, you'd be subject to that lien here. So it's only for Californians in California, okay? Two things real quick, just want to touch on. Who's in charge of the account, okay? Now, this is the same list for setting up the account as controlling the account. The account can be set up or managed by the individual or by an agent under a valid power of attorney, meaning that your child, if they set this up, has the capacity to set up a power of attorney. If they don't, it's not going to work. If not, it's his or her parent or his or her parent or legal guardian or conservator. Okay, and because we're short of time, the thing that I would suggest to you is this. Imagine, and one of the things that we always have to look at is if you were to set up the account as the parent, and let's say your child didn't have capacity and you passed away, I don't see sibling on that list or anything along that line, and it probably would force a conservatorship, okay? So there's a couple things with this. One is you really need to think that through if capacity is an issue. Secondly, I want to applaud the CalABLE people because they really do. You should sign up on that list, and you're going to get a ton of emails here. But they're asking for your participation, and there's going to be some changes in the law we're going to want to make to be able to better utilize these ABLE accounts, and some of that may be changing some of the conservatorship laws. Maybe what we need to do is some sort of a specific conservatorship law here for ABLE accounts that's a little less draconian than our current laws. Okay, last thing I'm going to touch on, because this is just too juicy, okay, and I'm going to get to the bottom line on this. For those of you that are on SSI, that have children on SSI, one of the most perplexing things is if your child is unable to pay for their household expenses. So let's say they're living in your house and they can't pay their fair share of their household expenses. Their SSI will be reduced by $265. It's one of the, and they're being penalized because, God forbid, you're helping your disabled child. And we can all see why that's a bad thing. And so, I mean, it's one of those things, it's just a crazy rule here, and it's just kind of, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Because the account belongs to the child, if you pay for the housing with the account, there's no reduction in benefits. So let me give you an example. I did a program with Carrie's, with the former director, and afterwards we had a mother that came up and said, well, I have got this situation where they figured out that my child's household expenses, her fair share of the household expenses for living in my house is $1,400, which of course you can't pay with $892. It's just not possible, right? I said, try this. Try opening up an ABLE account, put $1,000 in that ABLE account, okay? And then at the beginning of the month, take the $1,000 out, take $400 of the SSI and pay yourself for the rent. Now they're paying their fair share. Now take that $1,000 and put it right back in the ABLE account and do the same thing next month. And she goes, well, we're laundering money. And yes, we're laundering money right out in the open. So she went down to Social Security and says, well, this is what I want to do because this clever attorney said to do it. And I sent him, and I sent her the regulations, which once again, if you send me an email, I'll send you a link to the regulation here. And at first they said, you can't do that. We never heard of that. Then I get a call back about 6 weeks later that, oh my God, they said it's okay, and they sent me a check. And I go, great, send me 30%, which she didn't do here. Anyway, here's the thing, and we could spend tons and tons of time on this. There's a lot of issues with this. It has many, many uses, okay? It also, I look at it as a set of building blocks here, and you can put those blocks together however you like, and you're going to run into some problems, but you're going to run into some benefit here. Oftentimes, tying these things in with special needs trusts will get the best of all worlds. And with that, that's the shortest ABLE program I've ever done. Anyway, thanks.
Thanks, Steve. That was really helpful. Again, we're going to have hopefully some time at the end for additional questions. So I'm now going to take over and talk to you about how you might use your personal assets to supplement government benefits by way of funding a third-party special needs trust. So first, by a quick show of hands, how many of you have set up a special needs trust for your child so far? Oh, that's pretty good. A good chunk of the room. If you haven't done it yet, no worries. There's always still time. But whether you have or not, I'm going to walk you through a case study in a minute that I think is going to be insightful for you regardless. But let me turn briefly to my introductory slide. As I told you before, I'm a principal at Bernstein. It's a global money management firm where we work with high net worth families and have been advising them for over 50 years now. But really what this slide is an excuse to show you some cute photos of my son Milo. I have 3 boys. Milo has global developmental delays, complex disabilities. I'm happy to report that he's now successfully integrated in a general education program at a public elementary school in San Francisco, where he's doing wonderfully. And he is the reason why I am a passionate advocate in the disability community, and also why I spend a lot of my time now advising families when they have special needs children with regard to financial planning. So why is financial planning so important for people with disabilities? Well, at the crux of this is the fact that many people who are disabled may not be able to work full-time in a way that allows them to financially support themselves for their whole lifetime, especially without ever suffering from undue discrimination or having some kind of a breakdown. So what this means for you as a parent is potentially being on the hook for a lifetime of financial support for your child who may live decades longer than you do. So that can feel like a crushing obligation, I know. On the positive side, as you know, if you've seen Jim speak before, there are a ton of government programs designed to help children, support children with disabilities, people with disabilities. The primary monetary program is SSI. That's designed to cover the cost of food and housing for a person with disabilities. But at its maximum in California, it's $896 a month. So if you find a group home that takes SSI and Medi-Cal and doesn't charge the family any additional money, that can be a wonderful outcome. But most families I speak to are apprehensive in some ways about just assuming the group home option will take care of their child, and they want to have the flexibility to look at private housing options. And if you do that and you can't get a Section 8 voucher, $896 a month does not cover the cost of a studio apartment in the Bay Area, let alone food. So what do you do? What do you do if government benefits don't cover all the costs that your child will incur when they're living independently? Well, that's where we turn to this vehicle called a special needs trust. So a special needs trust, as many of you may know by now, it's the legal sort of shell entity that is designed to protect assets available to a person with disabilities while allowing them to continue to access government benefits. So the trick here is that the assets that go from you directly into the special needs trust and they never pass through your child's hands. So that enables them to pass the countable asset test for SSI, which says that they cannot have more than $2,000 in their name at any given point in time. So that is the vehicle that I'm focusing on. I do want to point out that very briefly that there are different types of special needs trusts. You want to make sure when you're talking about an inheritance that you're getting a third-party special needs trust. Just to clarify briefly, there's something called a first-party special needs trust that typically is a result of some kind of an accident where there's a lawsuit and the court awards a financial sum to the person who became disabled. So it goes from the court to the person who became disabled, and then because that person wants to access government benefits, it moves from them into a first-party special needs trust. But if you don't have to have that option, it's better not to, because these are very strictly managed vehicles. The court supervises them, and there's a Medicaid clawback when the person with disabilities dies. There's also something called a pooled special needs trust. That's generally for lower funding amounts. It's a pooled vehicle, so it's one size fits all, and any remainder when the disabled person passes away generally goes to the charity that runs that trust. So we are focusing on the third-party special needs trust. That's the vehicle designed to capture the inheritance that you would otherwise give directly to your child. It's never their direct asset, so they can preserve their government benefit access. And you can name remainder beneficiaries. You can name other children, relatives, and there's no Medicaid clawback. So we're focusing on the third-party special needs trust. And we have to translate that into how do families make use of this and plan to actually fund a special needs trust. When I work and meet with families for the first time, there are a series of questions that I go through that help me understand better how to plan. The first series of questions, I'm not going to read all of these to you, but they're designed for me to understand better the specific needs of the child. I want to understand what's the nature of their disability, how is their health, do we have any sense for their life expectancy, do you think they're going to work at some point? All of these questions will figure into the planning in a significant way. Then I talk to the parents about what their goals are. What's your vision for your child after you pass? And what is necessary to make that vision a reality? And are there any rainy day scenarios that you'd like to plan for? I'll note that if there are siblings, it can complicate the picture. And I'll point out that with special needs families, fare is not always equal. There are some families who feel like the special needs child should get a higher percentage of the estate, some who feel like there should be a default kind of pro rata equal distribution amongst all the children, and others who feel like the special needs child should get a smaller percent of the estate. So I'm not here to judge, and no one should judge you. Nobody should judge you. Nobody has that right. You should define what your goals are, and your advisors who work with you should help you figure out how to achieve those goals. So once I go through all of these questions, then I have to turn that into actual numbers, right, and help a family figure out how to fund their special needs trust. And so to illustrate how that works, I thought it would be helpful to go through a case study that I actually created for this conference. This is for a family that I know in the Bay Area. They don't actually have enough wealth to be a client of mine, but they do have a lot of issues that I think are relevant to many, many families. So here we have Carrie and Mark, 42 and 46 years old. They have one daughter, Gina, who's 10 years old. She has complex disabilities. She has sensory challenges. She's on the spectrum. She's an AAC user. Currently, the total assets in their estate are $425,000, of which $350,000 are in retirement accounts, a variety of IRAs, 403Bs, etc. And they told me that they envision that Gina will move out of their house and live on her own or with roommates, probably, when she turns 25, so in the year 2033. They're confident that when Gina turns 18 that she will qualify in full for SSI, that if she needs a one-to-one companion then, like she does now, that will be funded through IHSS or the Regional Center, one of those programs. And they will cover any additional gap between the possible sources of funds and Gina's actual expenses. So they are just dying to know, based on this fact pattern, do they have enough for their own retirement? And can they fund a special needs trust for Gina? So to be able to answer those questions, I needed some more information. I need to know how much are they going to earn until they retire, how much do they spend, and how much annual financial support will the Special Needs Trust need to provide to Gina? So they gave me some more information. So Carrie works full-time. She has a salary of $150,000. She plans to work until her full retirement age of 66, at which point she will receive a pension of $30,000. Now, Mark currently receives compensation as the full-time IHSS caregiver for Gina. And that means that he earns $40,000 a year of non-taxable income. That's a nice feature of IHSS when you're the parent. Non-taxable income. And he'll earn that until Gina moves out in 2033, at which point he expects to cease to be the one-to-one caregiver for Gina, and they'll find someone else if she still needs it. And at that point, he'll take on some kind of part-time work and earn about, $40,000 a year. Both of them will get Social Security when they're in retirement, about a little over $40,000 a year combined. They said that as a family, right now they spend a little over $90,000 a year, but once Gina moves out, they think that as a couple, they'll spend a little over $70,000. So this was all very helpful to know. But I still need to know, how much will Gina need? How much annual spending will be necessary to support her once she moves out? So Gina's only 10 years old. I know this is really hard to figure out. Okay, she's going to move out in 15 years. How much spending is going to be needed to support her? But to get their Carrie and Mark thinking about this, I showed them this chart. Now, this is in this white paper that I helped to publish last year about planning for special needs families. I have a few extra copies if anybody wants to see it. But there's this chart in there where I show typical monthly expenses that add up to $50,000 a year of annual spending, or $100,000 a year, or $200,000 a year. I see the whole range. But I will tell you that once I showed this to Carrie and Mark, they felt like they could edit the numbers. Everyone's going to slash this number or increase that number. It's fine. Everyone's expectations about budgets are different. But they said that $50,000 seemed like a reasonable assumption for what spending support Gina would need. So remember, that Gina, we're expecting her to qualify for SSI, so $896 a month or $11,000 annually. And Mark and Carrie are going to fund the difference between the $50,000 of spending and the $11,000 of income. So they're on the hook for $39,000 a year once Gina moves out. And they're going to pay that $39,000 a year out of their own estate until they die. They told me they expect to, based on their family history and their current health, they think they'll live to their late 80s, so I gave them 45 years. And then once they die, their assets will fund that special needs trust, and that trust needs to support that $39,000 of annual spending until Gina passes. And they think that she'll probably live until her late 80s as well, so that's another 30 years. So this is a very long time horizon that we're planning for. So given this, I need to be able to answer, do Mark and Carrie have enough for their own retirement, and can they successfully fund a special needs trust for Gina 45 years from now? So to answer those questions, I turn to Bernstein's forecasting analytic tool, where we look at key drivers like time horizon and spending and asset allocation. And we stress test the numbers for higher than expected inflation, poorer than expected market returns, because I really want to understand with a high level of confidence what could happen to their estate over time. So once I ran their numbers through our model, I wanted to first figure out what the target was to fund that special needs trust when Mark and Carrie die. How much do they need to have left in their estate when they pass in order to cover Gina's spending needs for the remaining 30 years of her life? Well, the answer depends on how confident you want to be that that trust will never run out of money during Gina's expected lifetime. I like to plan conservatively with a high degree of confidence, and so I like to look at the 90% confidence level. Mark and Carrie agreed, so the funding target is a little over $1 million. Now, some of you may be thinking, putting two and two together, okay, they've got a little over $400,000 in their estate right now, and they have to pay for their own retirement. How on earth are they ever going to be able to fund $1 million special needs trust when they die? Well, to show you how this might all fit together, I'm going to share with you this next slide, which shows what actually happens to their estate over the next few decades. And what you'll see is that even though in year one today, right, they got a little over $400,000, remember that they're still working. They work for the next 20, 25 years. So during that time frame, their investments are properly allocated and earning a return, and they're saving. They're net savers, and so they're adding to their investments over time. So their estate will grow from $400,000 to a peak of $1.6 million, at which point they retire. And when they retire, they're going to start withdrawing from their investments to support their own retirement living expenses, and their estate will start to shrink. And by year 45, which I'm giving as their life expectancy, they should still have about $600,000 left in their estate. Now, $600,000 is not $1 million. There's still a gap. And what do we do about that? Well, it turns out, Mark told me, that there is a little bit of a twist here. The house that Mark and Carrie and Gina live in right now is actually owned by Mark's parents. And they have told him that when they die, that Mark and Carrie and Gina will inherit the equity in that house. That home equity is actually currently worth $500,000. So when you put those two numbers together, they can actually hit that funding target for the special needs trusts of a little over $1 million. So I just want to pause here for a second and just say that for Mark and Carrie, when I walked them through this case study, this was just a big relief because they had actually held off on calling their estate planning attorney to set up a special needs trust because they did not think it was worthwhile. They thought they didn't have enough assets, and it wasn't worthwhile to go put the effort into the planning because they would just be told, you don't have enough. But once I walked them through this analysis, they realized that it was a catalyst and they could move forward and it would be worthwhile to plan. And ultimately, this is obviously very important to ensure the quality of care that they want for their daughter. But I'm going to throw in another twist, which is what if that little magical home equity was not part of the equation? What if Mark and Carrie do not inherit their home? And this is where you may want to turn to life insurance as a potential filler for that gap. Now, I'm not a life insurance broker, so this is completely objective advice. I think that life insurance, especially whole life insurance, can play a specific role for families in a certain financial demographic with special needs children. I think it's not for everybody, but it can fill for certain families a very specific role. And for Mark and Carrie, I wanted to explore this option just in case. So I know that there are some insurance brokers around, and Todd, do you want to raise your hand? Todd Temple. I actually spoke to Todd when I was putting this case study together. And I called him up. He works with special needs families, just so you know. And I said, what would it take to purchase a $1 million guaranteed second to die whole life insurance policy? And I said very specifically, I want to have an inflation adjustment on the death benefit, because if we don't have that, I know it's going to cost more, but if we don't have that, $1 million in 45 years is going to be worth a fraction of what it is today. It's not going to get Gina the care that she needs. So let's make sure we have that inflation adjustment in there. So, it all depends with insurance on what bells and whistles you add to the policy, but it's sort of a basic middle of the road annual premium that we felt was reasonable to assume was $15,000. So could Mark and Carrie afford this policy? So I went through and ran the numbers in my analysis again. And I added in that additional $15,000 annual expense. And what I found is that Mark and Carrie could afford that policy for the first 40 years. But then in the last 5 years of their life, somewhere in there, they're going to run out of money. So most people don't want to plan on running out of money in the last 5 years of your life. And so what I said to them was, listen, another way to look at this is that if you reduced your annual spending by $4,000, so a little over $300 a month, you could actually make that life insurance affordable. And you could hit year 45 and still have around $100,000 left in your estate. And when you add that $100,000 to the $1 million life insurance death benefit, you could actually hit your funding target for that trust. So that's the case study, and I hope that it's useful for you to see that there is no one right way to fund a special needs trust. There are different strategies, different assets that you can use, and I hope by seeing this that some of you in the room understand how to get the pieces to fit together and also feel like you can actually have that catalyst and move forward with making the right choices to get there. All right, so that's it for me, and I think we're going to open it up for Q&A. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think we're going to go up to the, yeah. Oh, are these on? No questions. Oh, really?
I wanted to, there was something that was brought up about somebody getting child support and having that screwing up the benefits. I just want to let you know, if you have the child support court-ordered into a special needs trust, it will not count as income. It won't interfere with the IHS and that kind of thing. So just as an aside, I know that's an issue that came up. And, unfortunately in our community, divorce is a very common thing, way too common.
Two questions. One is for the ABLE account and the tie-in with there's the $2,000 limit where you can't go over that to get SSI. But is the ABLE account?
It's exempt.
That's exempt. Okay.
Right, and so where that can really, one of the places where that really comes in, and we were talking about that in our breakout session, the road to independence for many is to get a job. Okay, working. Okay, but the problem is you have a lot of folks that'll work and they'll keep going over that $2,000 resource limit, which will interfere not only with the SSI, but it'll interfere with the IHSS, the Medi-Cal, and all the other things here. ABLE accounts are really kind of cool because it's a place where they can set aside up to $15,000 next year. And then Carrie knows more about this than we do, but there's some pending legislation that will even sweeten the pot a little bit more. So what you'll find with the ABLE account is that there's all sorts of different uses for it.
And then in that life insurance example that you just went through, wouldn't they be able to have some cash value at the end?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's another twist, which I didn't go into, but definitely that could be an option too if they end up living longer than the 45-year time horizon. So great point. And I also separately want to point out, when I said ABLE accounts are exempt for the countable asset test, it's up to $100,000, at which point SSI is suspended. So you have up to $100,000.
Right, thank you.
So, but now I have a question for you. In your example where you had the husband who's the worker, and I do scenarios like that a lot, but one of the issues that would come up would be, what if the mother passed away? Because the second to die policy is good when the second person passes away. And I know oftentimes, and once again, as an attorney, I'm not an insurance broker, that kind of thing, but I know a lot of the families we work with here are relatively young and that kind of thing, and this is one of those things, and I'd be interested in what you think about this. Oftentimes, I suggest that you could get a really cheap term policy.
Yes, term for sure.
Which the insurance company knows when you're going to die, so they know they're not giving that away. But on the other hand, especially what jumped out at me would be, we would actually have to tell the mom that she can't pass away because we're too dependent on her.
Yeah, no, I fully agree that there should be a term life insurance component for a breadwinner when you have a special needs child, for sure. That should be part of the financial plan.
Dale, you mentioned something about when parents go on Social Security, that their disabled dependents, children, can then go on SSDI, which in some cases is significantly higher than SSI. So
Yes.
when you're doing this calculation of how much money you need to fund your child's life, they apparently go on that SSDI for the rest of their lives.
Right,
At a
so
high-
it's a childhood disability benefits,
Yeah.
and what you get is 50% of whatever parent, so let's say the parents, just to make it easy, both retire at the same time. And in this situation that she presented, the mom is putting away quite a bit. Dad's probably not putting away much at all for Social Security because it's tax-free.
But the mom's making quite a bit of money,
Right.
so they'll probably get a pretty good.
So in that
yeah.
case, if they both retired at the same time, and let's say he's getting a pittance and she's getting
Yeah.
a lot more, the child would get 50% of that. Then when mom passes away, the child would get 75%.
Right.
It's supposed to be automatic. Now, Social Security makes a ton of mistakes up here.
Yeah.
And 2 years after that, automatically they're supposed to get Medicare. But I would go along with the suggestion that was made, don't trust Social Security ever, get on them. The other thing with it is, this is not a gift. So let's say we'll go back to
Right.
all too often parents, it's usually dad, I have seen some moms do this, go, I didn't sign up for this, I'm out of here. They don't pay any child support, they just take off. But when they retire, the child is entitled to those benefits. It's not a gift, it's an entitlement. So if you have a parent who split, that money is still to be available.
Well, this
for the
was a
child.
big aha that I learned last year, and it's actually coming into play for my family. But part of my point is you then can take, hopefully, a higher amount and calculate that into your model.
Absolutely.
But also, I understand that your kid can then have more than $2,000.
Yeah, it's not
So-
means tested.
So
SSDI.
the game changes when a parent starts getting Social Security.
With this
somewhat.
exception,
You still want
if they're
Medi-Cal.
getting IHSS,
Yeah.
usually they'll be Medi-Medi, so they'll get Medi-Cal, Medicare. Medi-Cal will pay for the co-pays here, and it'll pay for the IHSS and some of the other benefits Jim was talking about. Now, just a word of advice. I see people, I actually wrote a paper called When Does It Not Make Sense to Spend Thousands of Dollars to Preserve Hundreds of Dollars Worth of Benefits? So there could be situations where people jump through tremendous hoops to preserve benefits that just really aren't worth the hassle. Then there's a lot in this room, of you in this room, where giving up the Medi-Cal would be unthinkable. So once again, Medicare and Social Security disability or childhood disability benefits are not means tested. But I would say for the vast majority of the folks I deal with, giving up the Medi-Cal still is going to be something that they're not going to do. But it depends.
Also, just to add, as Steve was saying, that Social Security does make mistakes. When you've got two parents, you want to, for the SSDI childhood disability benefit, obviously you want to pull off the parent who was the higher wage earner so that you could get the higher benefit. I had a case where Social Security made a mistake and they had the adult child, pulling off the wrong parent's account, the lesser income earning, and they owed $20,000 and they paid it to the recipient because they had made the mistake of not pulling off the higher wage earner deceased parent.
Yes. Hi, I'm a mom of a 10-year-old. I have a long road ahead of me. I am quite overwhelmed. I just need to know, where do I start? Who do I talk to first? I know I need to call IHSS on Monday right away, but do I work with a special needs trust attorney first or work with a financial planner first? Do I need to... What's at this point in my child's life, I mean, other than the 100 other things I'm doing for my son right now, what should
really
I focus
hard.
on?
I totally hear you. I personally would put at the top of the list making sure that your son is getting all the services that he needs. And Jim is a consultant, so you can actually talk to Jim and get some insight as to whether you are indeed have been informed correctly by your social workers that he's getting all the services that he qualifies
Probably
for.
not.
Yeah, right. So that's why Jim's a great resource. So I wish you luck in that because I know it's a big battle. And then I think when it comes to planning for the longer term and having an attorney and a financial advisor get involved, that should be on your list. It's not at the top of your list, just being honest, but because I know you're overwhelmed, but it should be on your list. And so when you get through a big IEP battle or whatever and find yourself with a little bit of downtime, I think it's a good thing. I think it's important in the shorter term legally to be able to set up all the documents, not just the special needs trust, but guardianship documents and Steve can tell you more about all the types of things he puts in place. But those are important things to have, just in case something were to happen to you and your husband. But then, as you think longer term in the coming, call it like 2 or 3 years, just have it on your list. I should probably think about the financial plan and just start taking steps now so that I will be in the right place over the long term. And then once you kind of do an initial check-in with a financial person, I would just, update that plan every 3-5 years. Just check in. It doesn't have to be something you do every year, but just make sure that you're on the right path and you're giving it thought at a big picture level.
And here would be another suggestion with it, which is this. Being a parent of a disabled child is like being part of a university where you're never going to graduate until your last day here. And even that, your job continues. The really nice thing about this community is there are groups like the San Francisco Autism Society, and there's all sorts of other groups like family resource centers and all that. And there's so much where you can get so much information. Let's deal with the attorney for a minute. How many attorneys are in the room? Okay. I would, do you do special needs trusts? No. Okay. Now, isn't it kind of interesting? I write a software program that's used by about 20,000 law offices across the country. Some of them, what they know is how to push that button, okay? And it produces a very fine trust, okay? Be that as it may, this is a very personalized area of planning. If I were looking for a lawyer, whether you work with the Dale Law Firm or a lesser law firm, whatever it is here, if I were looking for an attorney, you know what, you want to find somebody who's actually invested in the community, somebody who would take a Saturday afternoon and actually sit out in the audience here, or is actively involved with some of the local disability organizations, or maybe sits on the board or that kind of thing as a stakeholder. Because I will tell you, just as somebody who does this kind of planning, I cannot teach disability. I have tried. It is just not possible. A lot of it has to do with the experience of the attorney. And the other thing with it is a lot of attorneys have set up these trusts, but they've never actually seen one in operation. So having an attorney who actually works with the financial advisors and works with the trustees, is Herb Thomas in the room? For instance, and an experienced trustee is so important in this whole thing. And too many people, probably in my industry, they look at this as a commodity. Like, if I get a special needs trust, all of my problems will be resolved. Isn't that the most ridiculous thing in the world? Although, if you do one of my trusts, all your problems will be resolved. No, it's a document. You're setting up a plan. It's only as good as the advisors who work with it and the folks that are working with the trust. So a lot of it is, you're not just buying a document, you're buying the experience of the office. And the other thing is, a trust itself won't do it. It needs somebody who understands the investment and the tax part of it, somebody who understands how to make the distributions and all these other things. So you take it step by step, and the more you learn here, the better product you're going to get and the better results you're going to get, because the goal is not just keep your kid on a welfare program, it's quality of life.
Okay, we have 1 more minute, so last question, please.
So this is for Carrie. We've taken a lot of time to set up the CalABLE, almost 2 years now. Did we look at some of the newer generation platforms like Betterment, Wealthfront, and simplify this process rather than going with the traditional investment firm that comes with fees as the first thing?
Well, through our procurement process, as I was mentioning earlier, the laws are pretty strict in how that process goes. We certainly explored all kinds of things, but at the end of the day, whatever firms respond to our bids are the ones we have to consider. So, and we are bound by that. It's a competitive bidding process, or a request for proposals process, and so everybody. We put out a proposal that says this is what we are looking for. These are the services that we need. Here's the scope of work. and then it's open for binning. And then they're all evaluated on a set criteria. So that's how it works in California.
All right, I'm given the neck chop. So we are done. Thank you very much for your attention.